I'm Trevor Williams with Global Atlanta. I'm here with Sam Devine Jr., who is the author of Battlegrounds to Boardrooms, Life Lessons from the Liberian Civil War to Corporate America. And Sam is also the founder and CEO of Cross Atlantic Advisors, which is a consulting firm here in Atlanta. Sam, thanks so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I don't want to put you in a box, but we're here to kind of talk about Liberia. That's your place of upbringing and really shaped your life and the trajectory that it's taken. Tell us a little bit about Liberia, about the place where you grew up.
Liberia is a small country in West Africa, about 3.5 million people, that was founded by freed slaves from here in the States who went back in 1822. As a matter of fact, we kind of joked that the first 10 African-American presidents were presidents of Liberia.
Great. And your childhood was interesting. You grew up during a time of Civil War. A lot of people know about that in general and know that a lot of states in West Africa have had difficulty in their quest for democracy and things like that. But can you tell us a little bit about that conflict and how it came about?
Yeah, so it's interesting because my parents took us back to Liberia after studying here in the States because Liberia had 133 plus years of peaceful existence. And then we had a civil war, which proved to be one of the most deadly ones in Africa. And the reason for the civil war was really the difference between the African Americans that moved back there and the natives, if you will. And you know, for 100 plus years, there was this underlying distrust and maybe mistreatment that existed, and that ultimately culminated with the Civil War.
And so you write about that experience of going through the war. I think you were in your early teens when that started. Tell me about some of the experiences that stick out of your mind, some of the things you've written about. I know that in the book you talk about it being nothing like the movies. There's not this romantic view of war that you see on TV.
Yeah, the war is a terrible thing, and it's a terrible experience to go through. You know, any given day you could be shelled. There were several homes that were crushed by artillery that just didn't land where they intended them to land. There were bullets flying everywhere. And then there was just general harassment. Even in our home, we had soldiers come in and effectively try to loot while we were there. And we found out later that, you know, there was even, while my parents were talking to some of these soldiers, another guy was out with one of the ladies who worked for us and actually violently raped her in that process. So it's really nothing like the movies, and just survival is what comes to mind, and you end up being very thankful that you see, you know, each day you see when you live in war, because food's not guaranteed and, you know, water's not guaranteed. It's just, you know, day to day.
What are some of the creative things that your family had to do to get through that situation and survive on the food front or with water? Yeah,
so, you know, with food, we were lucky from a water standpoint. There were others who had a much worse time. We lived a little outside of the city, so we had dug our own well, and so we were privileged from a water standpoint. From a food standpoint, I kind of joke, while writing the book, I remembered there was a plant that we ate during the war that we had never realized existed until the war. And after the war, we stopped eating it. And so for the book, I started to ask around every Liberian I could find, do you remember that thing that we ate? And no one remembered it. Basically, this was something that prior to the war we considered just grass. We never paid any attention to. And then somehow during the war, someone tried it and found that they could get enough nutrients. So that's a very interesting story where you literally eat grass to survive, just to make it through.
How did that, you know, we're recovering from what is said to have been the worst recessions. It's the Depression, and there's lots of talk about hardship and people here in America suffering and things like that. How did your experience growing up inform your perspective on what hardship is in terms of economic straits?
Yeah, what it's done for me is I really have a lot of empathy having gone through. I know what it's like for someone to be truly starving. And so I've got a very empathetic view towards what's happening here in the States and around the world. I mean, there's still a lot of hunger in the world, and so that's really something I live with every day, having gone through that experience. That as much as I can personally do to help someone, I try to make sure I do that.
A lot of people know the general idea that there are opportunities in Africa, but when you start looking at the map, if you don't have the labels on it, I don't think a lot of Americans can name all those West African countries. So tell us about some of the opportunities in Liberia now that the country has been peaceful for, what, 15 years, 10, 15 years?
It's been at least about 10 years fully, because the war sort of ebbed and flowed.
What are some of the specific opportunities that you've seen doing business there?
So there are many opportunities. I think one of the companies that comes to mind is a company that's looking to export African food over to the States. There are also other companies that are opening daily. There are a lot of Liberians now that have decided to go back to Liberia to take their experience that they've gained here and apply that in business there. Besides Liberia, there's also a lot of opportunity in Ghana as another example. And the whole sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about growth rates, high 5% annually GDP growth rate. So it's a huge opportunity for businesses.